everyone, I'm your host Isaac, and this is Elytraflight's Garage. And now our story begins. Drones are expensive, so the obvious solution, let's make one myself. What could possibly go wrong? Spoiler alert, a lot of things went wrong. Lesson 1. Let's plot the effort versus tangible reward for making your own model aircraft. I originally thought it would look something like this. And maybe a few bumps along the way, and then eventual success. Like, that's what normal projects are like. But it turns out it's more like this. That first spike is when you say, hey, that kind of looks like a plane, or that looks like a drone. It looks cool. And that second spike is it actually flies. The cost curve is pretty similar. Nonetheless, I persevered. I followed an online guide by Flight Test and built a simple foam plane using foam boards from the local Staples office supply store. And hey, it flew. And it crashed. And it crashed a lot. And it crashed some more. Stuff kept getting bent. That's annoying. Lesson 2. Foam board is a good lightweight material, but is delicate and doesn't like hard crashes. So what did I do? I turned to 3D printing. Lesson 3. 3D printing is hard. A lot of stuff can go wrong, delaying your progress. Well, I started making a Frankenstein of both foam board and 3D printed pieces. As seen in this picture here, that got my plane back up in the air for a little bit. What I didn't anticipate though is that, well, the foam board kept falling apart at the interface between the 3D printed part and the foam board itself. Lesson 4, foam board is not very strong under blunt force, especially when the stress is applied to the edges. Lesson 5, hot glue is good at attaching things together, but is not perfect. We're going to see that's kind of a common theme here.
Then he got an idea. An awful idea. The Grinch got a wonderful, awful idea.
What if I 3D printed everything? I immediately set to work. Since I didn't want to simultaneously take on the task of aerodynamic design and 3D printing as a new task, I decided to copy the exact shape of the previous model and just design and 3D print everything myself. I started on the front, working backwards, doing the landing gear and all that good stuff, and I went, oh, well, hey, this is so much easier. The landing gear have screw holes that actually I can design for with the 3D printer, so now that's really easy where it wasn't before. No more worries about flimsy foam board because everything's plastic now, and I can design things exactly the way I want 100% of the time. Only a few hours of effort, and it's printing by itself. Hey, that sounds great to me. Pretty soon I'll have a full plane. Oh no. Well, my plane melted? Lesson 6. PLA plastic weakens under UV or sunlight or when exposure to heat. Not great for outdoor use. Okay, well that was a failure. Time to reprint in this other material called PETG. It's a little bit heavier, but it's a lot stronger, and it's a little bit less brittle, and it's also more resistant to temperature and exposure, which makes a big difference when you're out flying in the hot sun. Lesson 7. Organic supports are super helpful for weirdly shaped objects. And Lesson 8. Try to make parts flat if possible. It's great for design for manufacturability, where you try to make the parts as easy to produce as possible. It's good for creation in mass, but it's also good when you're under time pressure and you're trying to build a drone as quickly as possible. And so I continue. This plane will come together any day now! Oh man, not again. Lesson 9. Tall, thin things are likely to fail when 3D printed. Moving on, I started focusing on the wings. I decided I'd make a framework of spars and cover the wing surface with this very ASMR-worthy material. Here's an example of what one segment of the wing looked like. It had a nice little aileron in the back along with a fancy system of spars and structure to keep the wing intact. I also started working on the tail with a special servo mount designed for making the elevator. In this video, I had an actual 3D printed hinge for the elevator, but in other versions I tried a range of things, including compliant design, or in other words, literally bending the plastic a little bit, or hot gluing the elevator loosely to the actual body so that you're just relying on the innate looseness of the hot glue to work as a hinge. Lesson 10. Think outside the box when designing mechanical systems. For instance, compliant mechanisms. Not everything has to be perfectly rigid 100% of the time. If you can find something that can be a little flexy and you can get away with it, go for it. And voila! Here's the finished product. Now here's a question for all of you watchers out there. Put in the comments how much you think that thing weighs. Spoiler alert, it didn't have enough power to get its own body off the ground. Surprise! Lesson 11. 3D printed spars can get really heavy really quickly. I wonder if there's an alternative. Okay, the wings were way too heavy, so I borrowed the trick from YouTuber Tom Stanton and did this really cool single layer thick spiral vase mode wing design. Cut the overall wing, the weight of the wing by 3, which is huge. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. While I was at it, I decided to redo the entire fuselage and try a pusher plane design, because why not? After all, what if I crash and the propeller gets damaged? We wouldn't want that, so let's put it at the back. Okay, spoiler alert again. As you can probably tell, this was really heavy and really bulky. Lesson 12. See Lesson 11? I think there's really a better way of doing this, if only my past self had realized that. Okay, so that didn't work either. Time for a new design, again. I think you can see where this is going. This time the frame itself might have worked. It was a lot lighter. The problem was I was trying to print everything in 250 millimeter or around 10 inches for you Americans segments due to the size of the 3D printer bed back there. And I didn't really have a good way of attaching the segments together. You can try screwing it on or you can try hot gluing it on. I tried hot gluing it, but you'd think I would have learned my lesson by then. Lesson 13. Hot glue is not effective for bearing loads or holding critical components together. Duh. Should have seen that one coming. Also a little bit random, but I got sidetracked by this super cool filament called TPU. TPU is special and then it's highly resistant to blunt force damage. Like you can take a hammer and go BAM! And it'll still be perfectly fine. It just deforms and springs back to its original shape. Almost like magic. It's amazing stuff. So what if I just made my entire plane out of it? Let's try it. In retrospect, that was a really dumb idea. Just less plane and more rubber band. Lesson 14. Load-bearing components should be rigid, not elastic. That's why even birds have skeletons. Lesson 15. Screws are your friends. Lesson 16. Avoid reinventing the wheel wherever possible. I saw a video by Tom Stanton where he made a tilt rotor vertical takeoff and landing plane. The idea is simple in theory. It's a plane but with drone propellers on the wings that double as both the takeoff mechanism and the forward thrust. Overall, I was really proud of my design. It had a brand new electrical system along with a new SpeedyBee ESC electronic speed controller and a hand soldered development board for my Raspberry Pi to sit on and control the drone. I had to work out some new electrical issues, such as getting the proper gauge for the wire to carry the current to both propellers. Also, a brand new development hit the scene. Carbon fiber tubes! Lesson 17. Carbon fiber tubes are like magic. Use them wherever possible. Carbon fiber is extremely light and rigid and strong. You can put a lot of force on it, especially for a little drone, and it will not care. Well, things were starting to finally come together. A functional airframe, a good electrical system, I even had some nice software. And then things just didn't work. It turns out that vertical takeoff and landing is, although a nice concept, in controls, it's very challenging. It's like balancing on one foot blindfolded, which is surprisingly hard to do. I don't have footage of it, but I attempted to take the drone out to the front yard and fly it, only for it to immediately crash and break one of the motor mounts, so that was game over. I was also getting some pretty serious frame flexing, not from the carbon fiber rods thankfully, but from the actual airframe, because it was weighing so much that the airframe was bending from the amount of thrust that the motors were putting on the airframe. The 3D printed part in the middle could not stay fully rigid, which is a major problem for controls. Lesson 18. Go for a simpler design first. For a proof of concept, do not jump straight to something super complicated. And lesson 19. Make your frame strong. Okay. Well, I'm defeated. Again. Time to go back to college and come back in 6 months. So I did. In May of this year, I got back and immediately started working. And I decided I'm not going to reinvent the wheel, I'm not going to be super complicated. I'm going to take baby steps and start with something that I know is possible. Just a simple quadcopter drone. That should be fairly easy, right? At this point, after 2 years of trying and failing things, I'm getting kind of desperate to just get something in the air and fly, to show that it's possible. So, I started drilling. This is me and my dad drilling holes in the 1 meter long carbon fiber tubes with a carbide drill bit. The idea is that I could make an X shape and keep everything locked in place with screws going through the carbon fiber tubes rather than clamps grabbing them. I wanted to make sure that I was wearing a lot of protection. Carbon fiber dust is not to be trifled with. Thick gloves, N95 mask, safety glasses, and a full set of overalls to make sure the carbon fiber dust stayed off of me. Dad was also a safe distance away with a vacuum hose in an attempt to suck up all the dust and keep it out of the air. If you get that thing in your lungs, ooh, it's bad. It's not getting out of there. So after a while, I finally got there. A full drone in all of its glory. Also, notably, I added the SpeedyBee V4 flight controller, as well as the ESC, to the computer stack. I got rid of the Arduino for a while. I postponed the idea of a custom-made control system until later, when I have a little more experience under my belt, because I'm still a beginner pilot too. For now, I'll rely on the Betaflight control system setup, which is pretty robust, but also still highly customizable. And so it's time for flight, right? It was at this moment when Isaac knew he had royally screwed up. The drone frame is supposed to be rigid, not wobbly. This will make controlling the drone almost impossible. So, I'm done for. This design is a failure again. Okay, a week later I did that, fixed all the issues. It's go time, again.
Whoa!
Lesson 20. I'm a guy who spends his free time building paperweights. Alright, time to take another break from my drone to work on other drones. It's summertime, and summertime means the International SUAS competition. This was the first year I got to go, along with the team from Berkeley. Since the competition is based in Maryland, near Washington, D.C., I got to spend some time at the Udvar Hazy Aerospace Museum, which has hundreds of really cool planes and spacecraft. Seeing all the stories of engineers persevering despite failure after failure after failure reinvigorated me a little bit. It was also an amazing experience hanging out with the Berkeley drone guys and meeting the other engineering teams from around the world and sharing expertise. Go Bears! Lesson 21. Never give up. This time I knew I was close. This time I am leaving no stone unturned. I gathered all my experience from the past failures into one great culmination of my effort. Most notably, I decided I was going to print the entire central airframe in one piece. The only other separate pieces would be the motor mounts and the battery case and lid. Also, guilty admission, I got a little distracted by an idea I'd never tried before. I inserted small neodymium magnets into the actual airframe, so I created a magnetic battery case lid. I didn't end up using it in the final design, but it was pretty fun. It's a nice adventure. Finally, after about another week of constant effort, I got the drone set up again. This time, I was not going to take any chances. I set up a testing rig with a string so that it could simultaneously be suspended from the ceiling and from 4 attachment points on the ground loosely so that it had enough leeway to hover a little bit, but not go out of control. I wanted to make extra sure it didn't do any wild maneuvers and fly into somebody's backyard. Lesson 22. There will always be control system issues. A testing rig helps with that. After several iterations of testing, I followed a guide by Oscar Liang on the internet, which suggested turning off all the fancy PID loop stuff and just go with the basic design, just a bare minimum to make it viable to fly. And just like that, the drone started performing a lot better. At this point, I had nothing left to do but make a few final adjustments and make the leap of faith back to untethered hover tests. It turns out that suspending your drone from the ceiling on a string isn't a perfect way of testing the control system because you're introducing the oscillation of being on a literal swing set. So, on one fateful night, I took my drone out to the backyard and did my very first hover test with the finalized airframe. I was terrified of a nose that would flip, or worse, the drone careening off into someone else's backyard before I could shut it off. But sometimes you just have to have faith in yourself. At this point in the video, I'd like to spend a few moments to talk about my grandmother. Above all else, Grandma was a fighter. When somebody told her she could not do something, she redoubled her efforts and made sure she did it. For instance, she was the very first female accountant for a major accounting firm back in the 1970s, so she broke down the gender barrier. She also did everything that she could to encourage me to pursue math and science, so I really have her to thank for where I am today. Simultaneously studying mechanical, electrical, and software engineering at the #1 public university. Go Bears! In December of 2023, not too long after I started making my drones though, Grandma passed away. Nevertheless, she really lives on in everything I do. So, in a lot of ways, this is my tribute to her. With that out of the way, the moment you've all been waiting for.